Now, religion. Jimmy Buffett has a new song out called Fruitcakes in which he talks about religion. And I think that it's a shame that if there was a Jesus living, I'm sure Jesus would have joined him on the chorus, because if you look at page 800 in Matthew chapter 23, you see a condemnation of religion. In Matthew chapter 23, in verse 4, Jesus talks about religion. The scribes and the Pharisees. Scribes are people who actually wrote words and interpreted the Bible, as were the lawyers, and the Pharisees were part of the religious sect, our evangelists today. Verse 4, they bind heavy burdens, grievous to be borne. They lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. You know what he's talking about? Guilt. The entire foundation of religion in the United States is built around one thing and one thing. Well, no, more than one thing. Some great things. Guilt and fear. If religion loses this and this, they cease to exist, because that's all they exist by. Guilt and fear. You're afraid. You go to church, why? Because you're afraid that if you don't, you're going to go to some nasty place after you die. Nobody's ever come back to say there is such a nasty place, but that's how these people survive. They sell you an invisible product that nobody can question whether it even exists. So guilt and fear are the mainstay of that religion. And Jesus Christ, I mean, it's not, you know, you can look at me. I've had people say, oh, you shouldn't criticize. Hey, I'm reading to you the critique made by Jesus Christ in the Bible about religion. He says, you pour burdens upon people, and you won't move them with one finger. And look what he says in verse 5. But all their works they do to be seen. In other words, everything is from an outward appearance. And you've got great steeples, and you've got great temples, and you've got great processions, and you've got all of this kind of gold and silver and all of these things they do. And he says it's all to be seen. But look at the important part when he talks about people who interpret the law. And look at how important it is when you read that article about meditation in Newsweek magazine. And then you take a look at this on page 847, where in Luke chapter 11, verse 52, Jesus Christ makes a statement to the people who interpret the Bible. Look what he says. And that's why, you know, and I'm happy to see you thumbing through a Bible in your own hand. I don't want you to take my word and say, well, Bill said he said that. I want you to see that he said that. Okay? What did he say? He says, woe unto you lawyers. Luke 11, verse 52. Woe unto you lawyers. Lawyers are people who interpret the Bible. You have taken away the key of knowledge. How did they take away the key of knowledge? They didn't enter within themselves. You entered not in yourselves. What he's saying to you is, you want to understand, you want to have knowledge, you want to have enlightenment, then you've got to enter within yourselves. You've got to meditate. And he says, and them that were entering in you hindered. Now look at go to page 800 and Matthew 23, where we were a moment ago, and look at verse 13. Okay, Matthew chapter 23, verse 3. He says, woe unto you scribes and Pharisees. That's the preachers. That's the religious people of the day. Hypocrites. He calls them hypocrites. You shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. And look what he says. For you neither go in yourselves, neither do you allow them in that are entering to go in. It's exactly what goes on today. You know what he said? You're a hypocrite. You talk about religion, you talk about Jesus, you talk about God, you talk about all of this stuff. And you go to church, and you go to Bible studies, and he turns around in Luke 6:46, he says, why do you call me Lord if not you don't do what I tell you to do? And here he says, this is what you've done. You've cut people off from the kingdom because you don't enter within yourself, and you don't allow people in who are trying to enter in. What are you going to do? You know, and if I look at myself, and we look at one another, and every day you get a little bit older, and every day you get a little bit slower, and every day things start to wind down, and you haven't reached the point of even understanding what the heck you're alive for. And that's the worst thing of all. And yet once you do exactly what Jesus said, once you do what Buddha said, once you do what Krishna said, and you enter in yourself, you start to define a purpose. You start to flow in a harmony with nature. You start to change the way you think. Not that you change it, but the way you think changes. And it's a beautiful way to live, and it's a beautiful purpose, and finally you flow in a harmony with nature. Now, let me just show you here so that you understand what I'm talking about. First of all, we have to address what is the first thing that Jesus said you should do. Should you join a church? Should you join a Bible study? Should you read a Bible? Okay. It's contained on page 782. If you know nothing else when you walk out the door here, at least you'll have seen that. And you'll see it with your own eyes, that these are the instructions as to what you should do before you do anything else. And this is what he says. Matthew chapter 6, and if you look at verse 33, seek first the kingdom of God. That's the first. So let's put it on the board so that we all know this is the first thing that we have to do. Seek first God's kingdom. Okay? That's what you have to do. Okay. Now you have a perfect right then as a person to say, okay, that's what I have to do first. I don't have to join any church. I don't have to send anybody any money. I don't have to be part of anything. I have to seek first God's kingdom. Okay. So you could stand up and point a finger at Jesus and say, well, where do I look? You know, where do I find it? And that's a good question, but we'll answer it. Go to page 853. And on page 853, in Luke chapter 17 is the answer. Okay, Luke chapter 17, page 853, and look at verse 21. Neither shall they say it's here or there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. And what did he say a minute ago? You take away the key because you don't enter within yourself. See how personal it is? It doesn't make any difference to me. It's none of my business what you do. Absolutely none of my business. What you do is your business. If you want to thumb your nose and say, the hell with this, go ahead. It's not up to me. It's none of my business. All I can do is stand up here. I've told you what he said. He said, you've got to look for God's kingdom, and he said the kingdom is within you. You've got to seek within yourself. Now, you're on Matthew. You remember when you went to Matthew 6:33, which is on page 722? Let me just show you, because it's not fair to leave you hanging up in the air. How do you do that? How do you go about doing that? Tonight, Joan handed you copies of the Newsweek article. The Newsweek article says when you stimulate the pineal gland of the brain, your body fills with melatonin. Okay? Now, melatonin, among other things, is a skin lightener. Now, just go with me for a second, because I'm telling you, Jesus said, seek first the kingdom. He said it's within you. Now he's telling you how to do it. Newsweek magazine says the pineal gland secretes melatonin, which is a skin lightener. To the ancient people, the pineal gland was known as the single eye. Okay? So the single eye, or the pineal gland, will secrete melatonin into your body, which is a skin lightener, which is confirmed by Newsweek magazine on a 3-page spread that's in the August 7th, 1995 edition. Fine. Look at Matthew chapter 6, where you were. Okay? Matthew chapter 6. Now go to verse 22. And in verse 22 of Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye be single, pineal gland, single eye, pineal gland, single eye, pineal gland, single eye, pineal gland, bang, 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 it's like a, if therefore your eye be single, if you touch the pineal gland of the brain, your body will fill with light, melatonin, skin lightener, melatonin, melatonin lightener, light, skin, melatonin, melatonin, light, pineal single, pineal. You know, the thing is, yeah, it's in Newsweek magazine, but you're reading it in the Bible. If you stimulate the pineal gland, melatonin will flow into your body. If your eye be single, your body will fill with light. How? That should be enough. But if you look at me apprehensively and say, no, I am not convinced, he could have meant something else. All right, go back to the book of Genesis. The very first book in the Bible. The essence of all beginnings. And look at Genesis. Find Genesis chapter 32. You have to find that yourself. Well, when everybody has found Genesis 32, just let me know that you found it. Genesis chapter 32. Because we will finish this little escapade. Huh? 28. Page 28. Look at the top of your page for page 28. All right? Right after 27. Okay. Page 28. Now let's look at Genesis chapter 32. Jacob, one of the ancient... Now listen, folks, you got to understand something. In Newsweek magazine, understand, doctors in the United States did not know what the pineal gland was for 50 years ago. They used it for one thing only. And we have a doctor that comes to church on Sunday mornings, and he told they used the pineal gland as a point of reference because it's right between your eyebrows. And he said they would x-ray a person's forehead to see if there was any brain swelling. If the brain had swollen, the pineal might be over here. That's all they knew about it. Okay? But look, what you've heard Jesus talk about 2,000 years. Now I'm going to show you something. Genesis chapter 32, right? You there? Jacob sees God face to face. Verse 30. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Peniel, melatonin, skin lightener, single eye, Jacob, Peniel, skin, go, bang, 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 Newsweek, bye, yeah, there. All right. You seek within yourself, you stimulate the pineal gland by your meditation in the darkness, the melatonin flows, and eventually you see God face to face.